Hello, I'm Harry Hobson, President and CEO of Plymouth Harbor. We thought that it would be a good idea to give everybody an update regarding our building program here. The project I'm referring to is located on the far west side of the campus, and we refer to it as our Northwest Garden building. This 150,000 square foot building will consist of 3 stories over parking. On the 3rd floor, that will consist of 10 residential living units. The next floor would consist of 30 assisted living accommodations. And then the first floor over grade will consist of 30 memory care units. We're very excited about this project. We had our ceremonial groundbreaking in December of 2015, and we look forward to cutting the ribbon in probably the 4th quarter of 2017. Once again, there's a lot of excitement around this project, and thought it would be a good idea to have our project director, George McGonigal, maybe walk us through some of the interesting detail of this project. Okay, George?
Thank you, Harry. For those of you who have been keeping an eye on our project, you know that when we started, the very first element of the project was building the new cooling tower structure on the east side of the campus. That was necessary because the existing cooling tower was in the footprint of the new building. So once the new cooling tower was constructed, we were able to then demolish the old cooling tower and then begin site clearing. So the next step was removing the old parking lot and all of the landscaping that were in the way of the new building. Once we had the site cleared, we then began installing over 400 40 feet deep piling. Those concrete piling constitute the foundation of the new building.
Okay, I'll tell you what, why don't we go out and take a look?
So because of the tight logistics of this site, we're almost forced to work our way from the back, the south end of the site, out to John Ringling Boulevard. So in each of the major processes that we've done to date, that's the way the project has progressed. So we started installing piles over on the south end of the building and then wrapping around the existing building and ending out here. And you can see some of the piles that are still exposed that have yet to be encased in pile caps. You can see the extent of the building ultimately goes out, wrapping around the existing building to just shy of the construction entrance, as you can see it in the video. So the next step after we installed all these pile caps was to begin forming and pouring the foundations. As we came through the site, again, we created forms, poured concrete. You can still see sticking out of the ground one of the elevator foundations, and you see all that reinforcing bar sticking up. That's indicative of the kind of steel that we have in each one of these poured footings. Once the pile caps were poured, and you can see a grade beam foundation, and again, that encases piling that have been poured or have been driven underground. We poured the columns, the first floor columns, and you can see representation of those columns out here at the northwest corner of the building. And again, that process will continue right on around to this end of the building. Well, the columns that are sticking out of the ground, generally, if they're going to be enclosed in a wall and not out in public view, they're generally poured in a rectangular fashion. The round ones are usually where they're in the flow of traffic, or ultimately up in the independent units. If they're exposed in the unit, they're poured in a round fashion. It's simply an architectural, a more aesthetic look than the rectangular columns. What's starting on the south end of the building is we're beginning to form and prepare to pour the first elevated slabs. So let's take a look at that. All right, well, first I would want to point out to you the crane that we have on site. This tower crane is a critical piece of equipment for us to be able to construct this building. And we went through an awful lot of options before we determined that this was our most cost-effective way to build the structure. You can see that it's on tracks because we do have to have the ability to move it at some amount to give us flexibility. But that crane, essentially from that location, will be able to provide us access to equipment and do the concrete pours all the way around the building, except for the very eastern portion that will be done last. And then as we finish, that crane will back its way out of the structure and we'll be done with the crane use. But in the meantime, it's essential for helping us form and pour the elevated slabs. So what you're looking at right now is the first slab pour, and the building has been separated into 3 sections. So there will be 12 pours, major pours, including the roofs, that will be done between now. Actually, the first pour will be about August 18th or 19th, and we'll be pouring those slabs through the middle of March of next year. And the process is we first set up scaffolding, and then you see the aluminum beams. They're the silver beams running perpendicular to this building. Those create the supports for what will ultimately be the slab above. And then the yellow joist that you see will now support the plywood, which is the form boards, which you can see being laid out in this very first section. That's what the concrete will be poured on. And then, of course, once it's hardened and cured out, all of those forms will be pulled out from underneath it. Now, you see all the steel sticking up from the columns and the walls. There will be even more steel in the slabs themselves. These slabs are what's called post-tension design. And so before the concrete is poured, there will be hundreds and hundreds of cables laid out within that slab, as well as additional reinforcing bar. And then that will be encased in the concrete when that pour is done. And then after the concrete is cured, those cables will be hydraulically put in tension. And it's that tension that keeps the slabs in place. This building, when it's all said and done, will be meet all current hurricane code, 150 mile an hour wind load. The windows enclosures will all be impact resistant. This will be the safest place on campus in the event of a storm. What will happen now is around August 18th or 19th, this first section of slab will be poured, and then subsequently the next 2 sections of the first floor will be done. And then we'll come back to the south side, pour the second floor slab, and continue around the building, and then the 3rd floor slab, and then the roof slab. After that, we'll come back and pour the elevated garden above the garage, right where the crane is sitting now. And then the last thing that will be done from a construction concrete standpoint will be the slab on grade. And at that point, we'll just be pumping the concrete. We won't need the crane to do that work. That crane, incidentally, is 350 feet tall, or about 35 stories high. And while that seems like maybe that's overkill, in order to get the kind of loads that we needed, that's the size crane that it took in order to carry the heavy loads and reach as far out as we need to reach to the end of the building.
George, thank you very much for the update today. I'm sure it's going to help not only our residents, but also the families and other friends of Plymouth Harbor to get a little bit more familiar with our project. And we'll update this video from time to time at major milestones. So I'm hoping this is very helpful to you. Thank you.